First spring, temperature of the water usually at 83 degrees. We have another spring of water with a beautiful waterfall, right, just a bit further down amid the bushes. Of course, the waterfall is man-made because it sits within a tower which used to be part of a flour mill. These are 2 out of 7 springs. Where are the other 5? You've seen them in the aqueduct, right? We pointed out the aqueduct for you, where we pump them in order to go on and keep the quality of the water which we have in the Sea of Galilee. 7 springs which we have over here. Earlier this morning we showed you the hot springs of Tiberias. On the way back, the YMCA, right?
YMCA.
Okay. Have you ever wondered why there were so many lepers around the Sea of Galilee? Now you know.
Yeah.
Lepers, skin problems, right?
The healing
Hot water.
the water.
And this is the place over here where we can meet Jesus with a lady who suffered from bleeding. And she goes on and she touched the tassels. Remember right now the issue of the tassels? The tassels of his robe. And he could feel that leap of energy out of his body. By the way, he could let her go. He doesn't. He was afraid that later on she will have these feelings of guilt that she have stolen her healing. That's why he turns around and he would tell her, it's your faith which healed you. Now, this is what we hear about in the Gospels, of course. Oral tradition says that this lady comes originally from Caesarea Philippi. And after the healing, she was one of those who followed Jesus wherever he went. She stood actually on the way of the cross where Jesus passed by her carrying his cross. He was sweating, bleeding. She took a piece of cloth. She wiped his face. And she was given the name Veronica, which means the true image, because he left an image on it, which was literally the sweat and the blood. And that's oral tradition, all right, adding to what we read about in the Gospels and the hot springs in this area. Yalla. This is the place where Jesus gave the primacy to Peter. How come? All right, let's go ahead and talk about the place itself, and that will tell you why the Catholics would have called it the primacy. But let me remind you that the word primacy, that's a modern name which was given to this place. Today, where we are, we have a Franciscan complex over here which we call the Primacy of Peter. You see the fence? Just behind it, that's where we have a Benedictine complex over there which we call the Church of the Multiplication of the Fish and the Loaves. You've seen on some of the t-shirts the 2 fish and the basket of loaves? Yeah? That comes from a mosaic floor which is actually located at the church which is there. Both churches, if you go to the foundations of it, that's Byzantine. Both of them. And both of them were destroyed. They share the same history. This one was rebuilt by the Franciscans, if I'm not mistaken, in 1933. That one was rebuilt in 1982 only. But originally, it's the same complex, the same place where we are right now. This is at the foot of the Mount of Beatitudes, right? At the side of the hill, that's where we have the cave where Jesus often retreated to pray at. From that mountain, that's where Jesus went on teaching the Beatitudes. Now let's come and talk about the place where we are right now. First of all, people usually would ask, is this a place where Jesus fed the multitude? And my answer is very simple. Jesus went on a boat, and he and his disciples crossed to a solitary place. The multitude have seen them, and they follow them running along the shores. Well, getting from Capernaum on a boat, you have 2 options. Either you go east or west where we are. The Bible later on tells us about the green grass, correct? Which indicates the season. To go to the other side, you have the River Jordan. To cross it in winter time, that's impossible unless if you go 3 miles uphill, cross the bridge, then come down again. Which is quite impossible for these people to follow Jesus, you know, along the shore. So logically, this is the place to start with. Now, why this is quite important? Because many things took place where you are right now. This is the place where Jesus called his first disciples. Remember? He comes down to the shore. He found over here James, John, and Peter. They're fishing. And he told them, leave everything and follow me. I will make you. No. He said, come, follow me. I will make you to multiply men. Not fishermen, but to multiply men. Wait a minute, my Bible also says fishermen. God made the world, he made the universe, he made the waters. And then he came and he said, Dag. That's the Hebrew word for the word fish. It means multiply, because he said multiply, right? At creation, he said multiply. He used the term Dag. Multiply, the word Dag means fish. And in our language, the word fish stands for everything which is in the water. So this is the place where Jesus called his first disciples, and he told them, follow me, I will make you to multiply men. Interesting enough, Jesus from here, this is the place where he walks on the water. And they go to Gennesaret, which is just there. And then after this, they go to Phoenicia. They come back to the Sea of Galilee, and they go into the land of the Decapolis, there. The land of darkness, the land of the Gentiles. And for a second time, Jesus goes on feeding the multitude. This time 4,000 men. And this time the disciples goes on and pick up 7 basketfuls of fish and loaves. Numbers are not just numbers thrown in the Bible. They're meaningful. 12 tribes of Israel. The seven nations of the Gentiles. If you go all the way to the book of Joshua, chapter 3, you can see, which is a repeated, of course, a promise, because first it was given to Moses, then to Joshua, where God promised Joshua that he's going to be driving out of the land, in front of them, the 7 nations of the Gentiles. 12, 7. And Jesus multiplied the fish and the loaves. Remember the fish? When we were up on the Mount of Beatitude, I told you to look at the fish and the word Iktos, I-X-T-W-S, right? Which is him. What about the bread? I am the bread of life. Even one occasion, Jesus sails with his disciples on the water, and the disciples were hungry. And Jesus looks at them and said, I am the bread of life. I'm with you while you're hungry. Of course, referring to himself. So notice what Jesus did. He actually multiplied himself, the bread and the fish, all right, to give to the people, to believers. 7 nations of the Gentiles and the 12 tribes of Israel. John chapter 21, after the resurrection, Jesus comes and appeared to his disciples in Galilee. And we are told about 6 of Jesus' disciples who decided to go fishing. Went into the water. All night they caught nothing. They came back and they've seen a man standing on that very rock. And the voice asked them, did you catch anything? The answer is no. He told them, cast your nets on the other side. They caught it. Of course, they cast it. It was a big number of fish. It was sunrise. Yes, and tax collectors would be working. That's why you have to count your fish later on. And it was a big catch. But Peter noticed that it's the Lord. And obviously he was not well or fully dressed, let's say. So that's why he goes on, he brings his garment, he puts it on, he jumps in the water and swim over here to meet the resurrected Lord. And as he comes to the shore, he noticed that Jesus was sitting by the rock with the charcoal fire. And he asked him to bring some of the fish so he can go on and make and prepare breakfast, right? He cooks breakfast on what? Charcoal fire. What else we hear about charcoal fire? Peter was warming himself by charcoal fire when he denied Jesus 3 times. Here, Jesus appeared to his disciples, he brings breakfast, he cooks for them breakfast, and then he goes on to Peter and he asks him 3 times. He does not ask him, why did you deny me? He asked him 3 times, do you love me? I think that hurted Peter more. Lead my sheep. Leading, primacy. That's why it's called primacy for those of you who are asking. Lead my sheep. And that's when Jesus appeared to them after the resurrection on the very same shore where you are right now. One thing which is very interesting is the following. Look, the Sea of Galilee is the world. The world consists of Gentiles and Jews. Jesus selected fishermen, and he sent them to cast nets and catch believers or fish from all the nations of this earth. Interesting enough, the Roman geographers of the 1st century AD tells us that the number of the nations of the known world were 153 nations. They casted their nets, they caught nothing, they were in darkness. They've seen the light is Jesus. He instructed them where to cast their nets, so they do, and they pick up believers from 153 nations. The promise and the light to be shed on the land of darkness. Look at the statue. Peter on his knees, Jesus standing, passing him up the shepherd's staff. The space which is in between them is the Sea of Galilee. But as you can see, that Jesus is not looking at Peter. He's looking into the east, to the land of the Gentiles, the land lying in darkness. Disciples selected over here to multiply believers. Capernaum, I am the bread of life. I am God. The Mount of Beatitude above you, the commandments given to them. 3-4 verses, you can summarize the whole gospel, which has to do with Galilee. Jesus to be the Messiah, light for all nations. This is basically the symbolism of the place, and that's why only selected stories were written about the life of Jesus. After all, John did say it. If they wanted to write everything that Jesus said or did, not all the books of the world would have had enough space, but the stories were well selected over here, inspired by the Holy Spirit, so they can go and tell us who is the Messiah is, Jesus, working on the shores of Galilee.